Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance on Channel 6. I'm Gail Teixeira, Opposition Chief Whip, representing the People's Progressive Party Civic Members of Parliament and the People's Progressive Party. On this program, we shall focus on matters of public importance, bringing you information, discussions on issues and matters that are of concern to you, the Guyanese public, right here every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30 on Channel 6. Before we get into the meat of the program, let me remind you of the telephone numbers you can use to call in, which we will start taking calls probably around 1 o'clock. And the numbers are 225-0010 and 225-0008. As I have informed you in previous programs, that the Office of the Leader of Opposition is open to the public, and members of Parliament have been organising public days, and as including our geographic MPs who are in the regions. And there are a number of MPs who are available in Region 4 in Annandale, Honourable Gillian Burton-Passad, between 2 and 5 o'clock on Saturdays at the Annandale Freedom House. And then we have Mr. Kumar has every Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the morning at Eccles NDC office. Region 5, Mr. Harry Gill, Honourable Harry Gill, JP, Member of Parliament, every Wednesday, 9 o'clock at Bath Freedom House. And in Region 6, we have Dr. Vishwa Mahadio meeting people at Freedom House in New Amsterdam the first and third Monday of every month at 9 o'clock, starting 9 o'clock, and the second and fourth Monday every month from number 63 East Burbee's Quarantine Freedom House office. And then, of course, you have our office here right on 304 Church Street, which is between New Garden Street and Peter Rose. And so our offices are open between 9 and 5 in Monday to Friday, and we're open on Saturdays until 1 o'clock. And on those days, we have staff there that we're willing to hear your issues, hear your problems. And on a number of days, the Leader Opposition will be there. We have from time former Prime Minister who's volunteering at the centre from time to time, and the former head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Roger Luncheon. So please feel free to call our office, and the number that you can call is 225-3432. Remember the last digits? We have 32 MPs. The last two digits are 32. 225-3432. And if you have issues you wish to raise, matters of representation, problems, etc., you're free to call and also to walk in off the street. Well, what is happening since we last met here on Matters of Public Importance? As you know, the National Assembly will be sitting on July the 18th, and on the order paper are the Telecoms and the Public Utilities Commission bills. These are bills for debate. These bills are large and complex, and very, very complex and very technical, and require being sent to a parliamentary select committee. However, you know that this government thus far has been reluctant to send any bill in the last year to a parliamentary select committee. And whilst the government is bringing to Parliament a number of bills which we drafted during the PPP administration, they have made changes to them, and some of these changes are extremely significant. They require time to examine and to be scrutinized in a parliamentary select committee. But you remember, months ago, there was the whole issue of the anti-terrorism bill, which they rushed through in Parliament and refused to send to a parliamentary select committee, even though a number of civil society bodies, including the PPP, called for the bill to be scrutinized in a parliamentary select committee. In that bill, there are 14 penalties that require the death penalty. Can you imagine that? The death penalty. 14 times in one bill. Unheard of in any specific statute other than the Criminal Offences Act, which deals with the death penalty. And even in 2010, the PPPC government amended that clause, that section, to allow for life imprisonment and parole after 20 years, etc. And yet, you then hear months later the number one person in the country saying that, he's not averse to considering abolishing the death penalty. And I'm glad to hear that personally. But then why did he sign a bill that called for the death penalty 14 times in the anti-terrorism bill? Just months later. Incomprehensible. Don't understand. Can you understand all of this? There is no doubt that the telecoms and the PUC bills are critical for the modernization of the telecoms sector and to create a more competitive environment in the sector to make it more advantageous for investment, for business, for the consumers to pay at cheaper prices, etc., and of course have better service. However, one has to ask, have these bills as amended by the government been through a consultative process with the service providers such as GT&T, Digicel, and others, including civil society bodies? It appears not. According to my information, the answer is no, that the bills as amended by the present government have not been. You would remember that we had brought the bill in the last Parliament, and it went to a parliamentary select committee. In fact, Mr. Greenwich was the chairman of it, and we were in the minority because they changed the standing orders to give themselves an opposition, a majority in the committees. And that bill was almost finished in June 2014. A number of those amendments, which they insisted on bringing in the Parliamentary Select Committee, some of those have been kept in, plus additional amendments they've made. But this lack of consultation and transparency has become a norm in this country under the APNU AFC government. And so the focus of our programs on the continued lack of transparency, the continued lack of accountability by the APNU AFC government will continue to be a theme and a recurring theme in this program and other statements by the opposition until they change their ways, which they seem to be reluctant to do. And we can take a number of examples and more recent ones, because every week there are more recent ones. This is not just a trend or pattern emergence, and then it becomes the norm. And so we have seen this trend occurring since last year. Non-consultation, announcing things, you're now hearing about it, non-involvement of people, non-inclusivity, and then lo and behold an announcement is made. This was a trend last year. We can say by July 2016 this is no longer a trend. You know, this is the norm in the way in which this government operates. And we can take a couple examples for those of you who may think this is not so. The APNU AFC controlled Georgetown MMC, for example. This is a body that is local government, in which there are only 3 members of the council out of 30 that are not APNU AFC, 2 PPP and 1 independent. They have introduced new taxes and arrangements with no consultation. The container tax of $25,000 is a disincentive to business, and certainly there are ways in which to manage the issue of delinquents who keep their containers on the road for a long time. There are ways to manage the containers being on the road certain hours. In some cities, the containers cannot drive in the city in certain hours, or they can't offload in certain hours, so they only can do it between midnight and 6 in the morning, so they don't affect traffic. There are administrative ways to handle this. And there are other laws other than a container tax, or fee, as they now call it, because they're afraid of the word tax. They're saying fee now, it's not a tax. But there are other laws that can be used for persons putting encumbrances on the road or on the parapets and so on. But it doesn't fall under city council. There are other laws under other government agencies, such as the police. And so container tax, this is a disincentive to business, and business already crying out. It is a disincentive. They have threatened increasing property taxes in Georgetown by 10% or more. We've talked on this program about moving the vendors from Stabrick Market. It was said to be temporarily housing them in the place behind Parliament for 3 months, and then there was an announcement by another top government official that says they can't go back there into Stabrick Market. Now that 3 months is up, they have no place to put them. The owner of the place that they have been renting says, no, I'm not extending. And so where do the vendors go? As we've said before, these are ordinary people, majority women, majority poor people who are making a living decently. The location is not good for them at the back of the Parliament buildings, but they have abided, they've gone and tried to scrape by a living. And you know, the funny thing is that the number one in this country talks about self-employment, that the government cannot create jobs for people. The government doesn't have enough jobs for people, and therefore people have to learn to create jobs on their own, to be self-employed, to be entrepreneurs. Well, what are the vendors of this country, if not entrepreneurs, if not self-employed? They make a living by buying and selling, producing and selling. And so the issue of who is punishing? Kitty Market has been on hold for months. And the vendors have been waiting and they don't know what to do. And so the vendors in Kitty, you have the Border Market where they went and changed up all the arrangements in Border and on the mall. And the place looks like there's nothing really going on there. And the stalls and all the arrangements, they'd have hurt, again, another set of vendors. If we add up the number of vendors at Starbuck, Kitty, and Border alone on the mall, you're coming up with several hundreds of people, majority of whom female, majority of whom make a living to provide for their families, majority of them are single parents. And so, again, no consultation. Then at the government level, they've removed, and so, I forgot one thing, the demand by our councillor in the City Council for forensic audit of the City Council, particularly in the expenditures over the last several years, but more particularly with the cleanup of Georgetown, the Durban Park programs, and so on. Where are the contracts? What has happened? How do they procure these services? Imagine Mr. Cuppin, who is one of the two PPP councillors on the City Council, brought a motion. It was rejected by Mr. King. He submitted it again and did variations to improve it. It was rejected again. So that the issue of calling for a forensic audit seems to be falling by the wayside. But why are they afraid of a forensic audit? Why would they trash a motion for a forensic audit to call in? Why is the government, in its own volition, and the Minister of Communities, in his own powers, which he has many, to be able to call in the Auditor General's office, whether a motion is passed in the City Council or not, to tell the Auditor General, we want an audit of the City Council? Why have all these audits that were done costing almost $200 million of state entities? Why was Georgetown City Council never included in that, especially when the citizens of Georgetown know all sorts of hanky-pankiness went on under Mayor Green, and seems to be the trend and the pattern under the new mayor, Ms. Chase Green. So we have that at Georgetown, which is a total chaos. And then you have at the government level, what else is going on in terms of lack of transparency, lack of accountability? They removed the waivers that on VAT for farmers and persons importing agricultural equipment. Why would you do that? This is an agricultural country. This is a primary producing agricultural-based economy. Why would one hurt the farmers and importers who provide the agricultural machinery? Why would you remove the waivers that were given to them so that they didn't have to pay VAT on these agricultural equipment? Then they're removing the exemptions that are for importations for the manufacturing sector. So the manufacturing sector may have to import a number of items that come outside of the Caribbean region, the CARICOM region, for their production. And they go to what Guyana does, as does every Caribbean country, go to the CARICOM and request a waiver for the following items that come from outside of the region to be allowed, so it doesn't harm the production and the other manufacturers in the rest of the region. Every country does it. Guyana has done it, and we've got the waivers, and every now and again you renew them and you go back and you extend or you drop off items and stuff like that. And so the government is saying that it's removing the exemptions for importation for items for the manufacturing sector with regards, they want to all of a sudden now be the great champions of the Treaty of Chaguaramas. Understood, but the Treaty of Chaguaramas and the CARICOM allows for countries to ask for waivers to bring in items from outside of the CARICOM region. Why would we go and do this at this point when the economy is in such trouble, when the manufacturing sector is crying out as every other sector in this country? So, you know, one doesn't comprehend where this government is taking this country. And oh, don't forget the 140 increased taxes that were passed in the 2016 budget. Some of those taxes are now being felt as people go to get their licenses and so on. Those are now kicking in for people. And then we have, again, the rather strange occurrence that came up last week, and it was published in the Kayachan News. The Minister of Social Protection announces announcements about the old age pension and the accusations of double dipping and people who are getting or live overseas and so on and so forth. And in that article, which she has not denied or said that Kayachan News misquoted her or anything like that, her own PRO person has never mentioned that. So one has to assume what's in the Kayachan News has some validity. But she did say that, they're going to be tightening up and that people who live abroad and who are not resident here will not be able to access the old age pension. And then the law is quoted. And of course, she makes comments about the interior communities, and it seems to be talking about Region 9, where she's saying that people who get old age pensions will not get it if they're receiving from Brazil. Well, let's dissect all of this and deal with a couple of these things in pieces. One, the law on the old age pension does require residency, 20 years. But it also says ordinarily resident. Ordinarily resident. It doesn't say that you have to be here 365 days. The point is that you're born here, you're a resident in Guyana, you're domiciled in Guyana. You can vote in elections in Guyana. The election laws don't even require you to have been present the day before or the week before to be able to vote. It's that you are registered to vote and you're on the voters list. But the law they're quoting to say that people are not eligible if they are not in Guyana for 2 years. It talks about ordinarily resident. So a person here, particularly someone 65 years and older, can go off for a few months and come back. Is it saying that you can't get your old age pension at all if you travel at all? That you must be here all the time? That cannot be that. And the law does not say that. The law says ordinarily resident. Ordinary resident means that I'm domiciled here. Here's my address. I live here. This is my home. And that from time to time I go off and visit my family. I go and maybe in some cases for Guyanese who've been living and working overseas and who receive their pension, which is a contributory pension in those countries as NIS and the public service pension is here, that you contribute to it, they've earned it. But they may have to fulfill that they go there every couple of months to keep their residency there. But their residency is here too. The problem with this whole issue is that there is a lack of comprehension on what the world is today. The world today is about its smallness in travel and people making choices to move, to travel, to be resident in one country while they have a nationality of another country. If you look at the United States, for example, and the voting patterns, there's been an amazing increase of people who vote in the American elections who are not living in the United States anymore. And that has grown to several millions, when years ago it was only the soldiers that were assigned to different countries. In the last election, it was approximately 3 million people. So Americans are choosing to live in different parts of the world too, but they can access certain benefits. And so we too in Guyana, and our law provides for it. So if you have been resident here, ordinarily resident, why can't you access if you go away for a while and come back for a couple of months? You go to see your family, you cross over to Brazil, you cross over to Venezuela. Is the minister saying that in order to get old age pension in Guyana, that people have to be here for the 2 years every day and don't go anywhere? Well, the minister will be reaching 65 at some point in the future, and I want to see when she gets her old age pension, and some of the ministers in the government also are 65, many of them are far over 65, as well as many of the advisors who are over 65, and how many of them have not been resident in Guyana for the 2 years or the 20 years in some cases. So that's one issue, what the law says and how it's implemented. How it is implemented. Now, Let's deal with the interior areas, particularly the border areas. The borders have been created by man. So if you go to some parts of the interior, you pass a tree and you're now in Brazil. You cross a little stream and you're in Brazil. There's no fence, there's no barbed wire or anything like that. The lines of the border are not on the ground, they're on maps. Historically, Amerindian people have lived back and forth, and they've moved back and forth over the centuries and thousands of years. And so there are people who work in Bonfim every day and cross back to Lethem and live in Lethem. There are people who work in Bonfim who also have family and come back every weekend to their families in the Rupununi. They are able to access what are the benefits offered to them as workers in Brazil, and they have benefited and they have entitlements and benefits they can have in Guyana as Guyanese. They are still Guyanese citizens. They haven't given up their citizenship. But the borders are fictional in many cases because people work on both sides of the border and are able to access both sides. And if you go to Canada and you go to the different border towns between Canada and the United States, you will find a similar pattern of behavior. We are no different from that. And people access both. What are their contributory pension schemes, as well as what are some cases welfare pension schemes to help those that are below the poverty line or very poor. Same thing here. But why is she focusing on this? The Bureau of Statistics talks about approximately in their projections of population that the population on that 65 and over is approximately 43,000. At no point have the number of old age pensioners who are 65 and over have gone beyond that, and most of the time fall behind that. In addition to that, why is Minister not focusing on those who are 65 and over, and by the way, I'm not yet, I hope I don't look like that, but I'm not yet, that are accessing it, have not been denied it, who are in the good brackets, in the higher brackets, who are not poor, because the whole area of the old age pension was designed to help poor people, to help low-income people. That was the genesis of it 100 years ago, and it has remained under the PPP government, and it is here today. Why does she not focus on a number of persons in the 65 age bracket and over who hold very high positions and good positions in the private sector, public sector, and so forth? Why not you want to remove those? You could remove, say, that you have to be in a certain bracket. We removed the means test as a government. We removed it because in the days before 92, if you were getting an old age, your pension from the government, NIS and or public service pension, you were not entitled to get old age pension. We removed the means test so that a person retiring could get all the pensions that are available, the contributory ones like NIS and the public service pension, as well as the 65 plus old age pension, because there was a whole attempt to reduce poverty and to ensure that people had worked all their lives, contributed to Guyana, whether they were self-employed or they were never covered by NIS or public service pensions, would be able to have some assistance from the government. That was the idea. And now it seems to be that this is something the minister wants to be cutting and slashing. And in fact, we have to remember that they removed the water subsidies, they've removed the electricity subsidies for the elderly, and now they're going for the old age pension. Why? The money's in the budget. The money's in the budget and is available to people. And therefore, when she's talking about double dipping and made a comment about interior people are dipping from two different administrative regions, and I've had to say, if you live in some of those interior regions, it's laughable, absolutely laughable to consider that you would be able to come out of Region 9, collect your old age pension in Region 9, and then come out and go to another region and have your name down there and collect there. By the time you do all that traveling, the 18,000 you're collecting has disappeared. It doesn't make sense. And therefore it also calls into question the database, which has been scrutinized and which they say has problems. So clean it up, fix it. All of these measures. And then there was a hidden part of the statement in Kaiser News that seems to have gone by the wayside, and that is that the point about the consideration of removing public assistance from children who receive it in the interior, who are also receiving assistance from Brazil. Why the focus on removing what little people are getting in the interior? Why this bulldozering, this draconian approach to the interior residents? It is unthinkable. The public assistance is only a few dollars, and it's for every 6 months. It has to be reviewed every 6 months. And by the way, they put in the Board of Guardians in Region 9 and Region 8, and 99% are APNU AFC. So I guess these may be the people feeding the minister with some of these concerns. But the public assistance program was designed for those that had, circumstances that were extraordinarily difficult for families, funerals, health issues, children with difficulties, and so on. And also, it had been expanded under us to be given to mothers or single-parent headed households that were HIV/AIDS positive and therefore had difficulties working. And it's a small amount, but it was, and also adults who were taking care of children, even if they were adult children, who had disabilities of any kind. So these are real cases, and I've met those real cases as a minister and as an advisor going in the country, whether it's the coast, whether it's the interior. And every 6 months it has to be reviewed, and so on. And we decided that persons who were taking care of children with disabilities, even if they were adult, and mothers with HIV/AIDS, would automatically not have to be reviewed every 6 months. Because in both situations, there's going to be no change whatsoever in their situation. And these are issues the minister seems to be unfamiliar with, disinterested in. These are real life problems. And by the way, I saw the fire at the drop-in center, and there was somebody missing. I didn't see the minister come out of her home that night, and she doesn't live far from the drop-in center, to come and commiserate and to lend support to the traumatized staff, traumatized children, and to assist. Just an observation. Maybe she was busy, maybe she was sleeping, maybe she was out of the country. Who knows? But in 2010, when a similar fire took place, there were several members of the government, including the then Minister, Priya Malik Chand, the Permanent Secretary, other ministers of government, and of course in this fire, the only person of any high level that turned out was the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Jack Dale. He's the only person who went there. Nobody else from the government was there, or any high-level person from the ministry. So all these things make one wonder that, does this government care about the people of this country? Do they care about the poor and the vulnerable? All of these measures show how short-sighted and uncaring this APNU AFC government is. The government just doesn't get it, and I've said this before on this program. It is the economy, stupid. And I'm quoting President Clinton when he was in government, stating that, and he said it years ago, it's the economy, stupid. We have pointed out on this program over and over again that these measures are harming the people and the economy which is slowing down. Ask any businessman, ask any vendor, ask any taxi driver. The government and members seem to be living in some kind of bubble. When we look at the statistics, you have some amazing issues on the issue of the economy. There has not been, after the 140 tax measures and putting new taxes on inputs for manufacturing being imported, all of these are sending the wrong signals to investors, whether local or foreign. But this is an economy that's going down. No new foreign investment in the last year, no real new businesses. Whatever are being done now is actually what started in the BBC time. And in fact, the whole place is slowing down. The whole economy is slowing down. You go into stores, you go into the supermarket, you go to the market. People are holding their money. Not that they have a lot of it, but they're trying to make decisions on what to do because there's so much great uncertainty. They don't know what next the government is coming with. Imagine, the last sitting we had we dealt with the supplementary financial paper for the period September 1st to December 31st, 2015, of $799 million, of which, by the way, $450 million was for the GDF. And by the way, the GDF in 2015 annual budget got a huge increase of over $1 billion more in their budget. So the 2015 budget is passed on August 28, 2015, of almost $200 billion. September the 1st to December 31st, the government goes for an additional $800 million, $799.8 million, for additional money. And in that, based on our questioning, we learned that, to give you one example, is that 6,000 solar panels, which we had ordered for the interior households, and the computer programs, computer hubs. We had a program called Hinterland Household Electrification Program, in which we purchased and installed in 13,000 Amerindian households 65-watt solar panels, so they could get light. They could probably over time put in a fridge or a little TV or stuff like that. And they were installed, and they are there. You can see them in the interior in front of the houses. Whether it's a truly house or whether it is a brick house, you can see these little panels up on poles and leading into those houses. It has made a big difference for the performance of children in the interior schools, because before that there was just no electricity. So we ordered 6,000 more to complete the household electrification program, and to also put the solar panels into the computer hubs, so that the one laptop family would have, instead of giving a laptop to every Amerindian household, as we did on the coast for that program, in each village you'd have computer hubs, one building that was built, the solar panels we put on that, the computers would be brought in, and they would be able to have battery power so that the computers could work. And eventually then, with the other programs, with the fiber optic cables, they would eventually be able to be linked up and be able to have access to the internet in far out reaches of the interior. Well, the 6,000 panels apparently did come in and have been paid for. But they're not going to those areas, and they're not going to that program. They have been redeployed, according to Minister Harman. That's not his word, that's my word. But they have been reallocated to the State House and the Ministry of the Presidency to green those buildings by having solar energy. Well, 6,000 solar panels, 65 watts. I don't know how you're going to put those into the Ministry of the Presidency or on the buildings of the Ministry of the Presidency or State House. That is a nightmare, and a technical nightmare of no mean order. I can tell you that with all honesty. So that if they want to green State House and Ministry President, we have no objection. Order the correct size of the panels, because 6,065 watt is a level of absurdity of no higher order. And instead, so order that, put in your budget, order it, buy it. We have no objections to the greening and having solar panels and solar energy at the Ministry of the Presidency or State House. But take the 6,065 watt panels that were bought for the balance of the households in the interior and the computer hubs that are empty buildings waiting right now for the solar panels, and give it to that. Do what is right. And don't keep making these rather absurd decisions. And by the way, talking about laptops, for example, you know, the government closed down the one laptop program. They kept a few people on, fired over 100 people after they got into government. The program, said it was no good, etc., and they were revising it so that you would have 9,000 laptops, which were on order, which we had ordered, for that 2015, before we came out of office. And they decided that the 9,000 laptops, in fact it was 11,000 we ordered, but they announced 9,000 would be given to teachers. Any word on that? Have 9,000 teachers received the laptops under the One Laptop program? Have any received? And how many? And so, again, 9,000 laptops, where are they? Who's got them? Last program, last week's program, we had as our guest PPPC Member of Parliament Colin Crowell, and the Regional Chairman for RDC 5, Mr. Vic Chan Ramphal. And I hope that program was interesting. And I wanted to repeat for you the statistics that they shared in relation to the implementation of the capital budget in those regions. And for example, the overall average for the 2016 capital budget for the 10 regions is 25%. Region 1, however, we go by region, as of the end of June, Region 1, 20% of their capital budget implemented, Region 2, 15%, Region 3, 45%, Region 4, 12%, which is where the station is located and where most of us are living who are able to listen to this program. So 12% of the capital programs have been implemented. Region 5, 15%, and of course you know they haven't been allowed to meet for 6 months now because of one councillor who breaks up the meeting and the police are unable to do it. The minister doesn't wish to intervene, nor does the president. And yet there are supporters in that region that are APNU and AFC. It just happens that the PPC won the region. Region 6, 20%. Region 7, 30%. Region 8, 50%, where the council hasn't met more than once since they got appointed. Region 9, 12%. And Region 10, 20%. So when you're talking about the government contributing and the region's capital budgets contributing to the economy, because they provide jobs, they pay people, they hire services, this is very slow. 25% at mid-year means they're in trouble, that you're just not moving things forward. So let me say, is the economy stupid? If the government is providing and is contributing more than 50% towards the economy in terms of capital, in terms of investment, in terms of creating jobs, in terms of contracts, then why would you let the economy and the government slip so badly? And therefore, with the 7 out of 10 regions, which we thought was just our regions were having a bad time in implementing their programs because of sloth and the ability to get the REO to listen to what the council wants to be done and what is in the programs of these councils, we found, lo and behold, that Region 4 is in terrible straits. Region 7 is a little better off, and Region 10 slightly. But even in their regions, the slothfulness of the projects, the awarding of the contracts, in some cases, they're in violation of the procurement arrangements. So this is where over $1 billion is not getting into the economy because of what is going on in the regions. And our information is exactly the same at the ministerial level in these 27 ministries. The budgets just aren't moving as they should. Companies, therefore, cannot get work, businesses can't get work, and therefore are laying off workers, etc. We talked about this before in this program quite extensively. And then we have one of the last issues I want to raise in relation to transparency and accountability. You know, there was a lot of brouhaha about the local government elections and the restoration and the return of local government democracy under the APNUFC. The elections are over since March the 18th. The results have been known March the 19th, March the 20th, and the results are that the PPP got 48 of the 71 local authorities, and there are 6 local authorities that are tied up to now between the PPPC and the APNU, and which are not able to function at all. However, since the local government elections, the Ministry of Communities seems to have lost its vigor. And so, or maybe it's because they're still recovering from the shock of the PPP winning 48 of the 71 local authority areas, as well as the tied ones, the tied LAAs, and the fact that the PPP got almost 30,000 more votes than the APNU in these elections, just less than a year after local government elections, national and regional elections. So the minister has taken weeks after the councils were appointed and sworn in by him and the president that to approve the new signatures on the NDCs and municipalities' bank accounts. And that has taken about 2 months. And then now the councils have sent in almost 2 months ago their budgets. And this is now their budgets of what money they know they have or don't have and how they expect to be able to make it. So this is not taking money from central government. This is money strictly to do with the local government bodies themselves. the law says the minister has to approve it, and generally it's a very rapid affair, because what the scrutineers will look at in the Ministry of Communities is to ensure that the chaps in the councils aren't spending a lot of money on entertainment and booze and stuff like that, but they have realistic programs that can bring benefit to the people. It is now July, and up to now, these budgets, which are the council budgets, newly elected councils, cannot access their budgets because the minister has not signed off on them. And so, you know, one thing about this government is that when they can't control, or they haven't won elected bodies, like the 7 of the 10 RDCs, the 48 of the 71 local authorities, when they can't control them by elected means, they then seem to try to control them by bureaucratic sloth. By the way, subventions under the Fiscal Transfer Act, which we saw in the 2016 annual budget for the local authorities, have not been released to them as yet either. So when you start cussing up your newly elected NDCs and municipalities, except Georgetown is in a different kettle of fish completely, that please remember that the councils are really in a bad position right now. They don't have access to their budgets. They now can sign off on their bank accounts, but until the minister agrees with their budgets, they can't do anything. So no work, nothing is happening at the NDC level and the out of the smaller municipalities. And they also haven't got their subventions. So the year is halfway done and nothing is happening. And for those of us, you know, who have lived through the old days of the People's National Congress in government in the 70s and 80s, all of this tastes and smells familiar, awfully familiar. And we seem to be back on the road of creeping authoritarianism, of control and rule by diktat. The number one person says that the local government bodies must be self-sufficient. How is that possible? To provide services with small populations and few businesses in some of these NDCs. Not very few NDCs have big businesses in them and providing money. Some do, some don't. But it's a good position to say that at some point these bodies could become self-sufficient. Maybe in the next 10, 20 years, but then I've seen in other countries where cities, huge cities, have had to be bailed out by central government, who went bankrupt. Middle cities in the United States that went bankrupt, where central government has had to help out. So that the reason why government helps out, the reason why government gets involved, is because you don't want people to punish. You don't want people to suffer. That's the intention of it. And so it's a good objective that at some point there will be self-sufficiency. There are many cities in the world that receive support from their central governments, even though they may be able to attain a certain amount of revenue on their own accord, and that's why the Fiscal Transfer Act put into it an incentive that the NDCs and municipalities would be gauged on, their subventions would be gauged on size of population, geographic location, their performance, and their performance when it comes to revenue collection with rates and taxes, and in attracting business into the communities. So there is a model in the Fiscal Transfer Act to help municipalities and local bodies like the NDCs reach as a process, as a progression forward. Not these statements that seem to point that this is coming soon. It can't come soon. They don't have the capacity. We haven't got the capacity. But you know, we see a number of things. I pointed out the Board of Guardians, the state boards, and the incursion of a number of the chairmen of boards, in particular the Guyana Revenue Authority, interfering in the day-to-day operations of the agency, including firing people, etc. But you know, we pointed out in this program over and over again the abandonment of the rice farmers, you know, and we're reading now in the papers about the new Gaisuko, and what it's talking about is other crops division. And those of you from the 70s, 80s remember well the other crops division of the Gaisuku, where they were growing black-eyed peas and other things to be able to be an alternate to sugar. Some of these chaps are living in a time warp of the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and it's time to get out of it and address the fact that Guyana, as a poor developing country, is living in the 21st century, not the 20th century, the 21st century, and it is now 2016. And the challenges that we face as a country are enormous, both globally, regionally, nationally, and locally. So, time for you to talk now. So, let's open the lines. I see the line flashing a little bit. I hope people haven't got impatient with me. But we'll open the lines and invite you to call in and to make your representation. And as I said, those of you who have individual problems, because some of you call in with particular individual problems, it's personal to you, NIS or whatever it is, please feel free to call the Office of the Leader Opposition, 225-3432. We're open between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday, and on Saturday between 9 to 1 o'clock. And you may be able to walk in off the street and be able to raise your matters that are a personal individual case. Let me take a call. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Could you speak a bit louder?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, good afternoon.
We work for the local election, and up to now we didn't receive any pay yet.
You mean with GCOM?
No, the government.
No, well, the government didn't have people working in the elections. It was the People's Progressive Party.
As an
Civic. Well, I would suggest you go to Freedom House, and where did you work, in Georgetown or other areas?
other areas.
Well, could you call Freedom House and raise those issues? Because the amount that was to be paid is by each region or each authority, each body, each party group.
We
So-
work at an RC at the Lenora police station, and up to now we didn't receive any.
All right, well, could you go into Freedom House either at Freedom House in Georgetown or the party office in Region 3, okay, to resolve that?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, so we have issues like that that come up every now and again. And so please feel free for those kind of issues that are personal or outside of the open mics, political. And certainly we would like to have these matters resolved because we don't like people feeling that they are owed money. That's not correct. People have worked and they are paid by a political party to be a scrutineer, as GCOM did not pay for that in the last couple of elections. Hello? Hello?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
That law in terms of the pension, under the British it was 60 years.
Beg your pardon?
Under the British law, under the British so when Bonham took it over 1964 when he became Prime Minister.
Right. Which law?
The pension,
Oh, okay.
it was 60 years.
Uh-huh.
Even to when Kelly was Premier, it was 60 years.
Yes.
And somewhere along the line, economical, maybe they could not have found the numbers.
Yeah.
They carried to 65.
Right.
Because even to the NIS, when that system was set up under
Right.
Mr. Lloyd Joseph, it was to give the ordinary sugar worker and public service and transport workers,
Right.
in case of accident or anything, you get some money there to take care of you.
Right.
And there is no law in terms of if you got a Guyana passport
Right.
under 1980 Constitution,
Right.
a Guyana passport, and you go to Antigua or Barbados, once you maintain that Guyana RGUSD, you're entitled.
Exactly.
You haven't given up unless you have an American citizen, becomes an American citizen, but then you give up Guyana. You can apply. But there's another problem. If you got an ID card, the recent ID card,
Right.
that ID card, by your birth certificate, you get that ID card.
Right.
You got American, becomes American citizen. It's a little problem there. Remember, you give up one.
Only if you
Or
give
will
up,
get the
because
USD.
remember, sir, that our Constitution provides for dual citizenship.
I know that.
So that it's only if someone has revoked their citizenship.
I have 3 constitutions.
Yeah.
So I know the thing. I did it under
No, I'm saying it for our viewers as well.
constitutional law and
Yeah.
directly. So I know the whole.
So in other words, you're saying you don't agree with this announcement by the Minister of Social Protection that people are not entitled to the old age pension if they're getting another
I'm
pension?
saying that once they have a Guyana passport,
Sure.
they're entitled to it
Yeah.
by law. Unless there's any crookery comes in the place.
Yeah, sure, there's fraudulence of any kind.
And the Parliament has to pass that bill, making it by a vote.
Yes.
But if it cannot be done, because it is the people's constitution.
Yes.
The people work and they're entitled to that.
Yeah.
The next thing I wanted to do, you remember I raised the topic in you come 3 weeks back or 4 weeks back about the Venezuelan border.
Yes.
When the document was issued, when luncheon and you were there, I was there, Basil Williams, Norton, and they issued the booklet with the 3 white lawyers and Mr. Rampal, the Attorney General, former Attorney General. They won the case in terms of Venezuela and the river, and there was a cost in case if the only trespass 250 million, and they wanted to the cost. Well, I went in to the ambassador to settle. So far, I haven't seen any, because Spain never give Venezuela on FOFO. There were 3 weeks as what Mr. Rampal said, they filed for leave to do the research, and the British had the document. They knew exactly what, because we inherited from them, and they couldn't find it. But they just filed that thing with Venezuela. But I noticed on the Brazil and Barbados news, he's saying that it was unfair that the World Court that given Guyana, the Coco and the Cayuni, this Spain never gave them. Spain gave them some way going back to Colombia and Trinidad. I outlined the whole thing. I gave first, she asked for a copy because you had to have an interpreter. So for me translating back to her. And when they read the document to her, translated back into Spanish. She asked for a copy, I gave her. The copy was sent to me. So the matter settled. What they do us now is how many times they have trespassed here, they just 250 million. And if they want any problem, they can file back to the World Court. They can file.
Yeah.
But the United Nations and the bank, he is only to push back. Like 2 neighbors got a problem with it. The police come and he said, look, you don't cross, you don't until the court make the final with the fall. You get the high court. And that is Ban Ki-moon's position. It cannot give. It was really given to Guyana by the 3 white lawyers. You were there, you listened to them, they had an electronic screen. Mandalal was there, they issued a copy. I got my own in the file, the matter was set. The other third thing we're dealing with, the problem is Bank of Guyana. Under your administration, you made some error when the World Bank made to get the documents straight and the financial, it is not coming proper good stream. No, the problem, our trading system.
Mr. Excuse me a second, I've got a few minutes on my program, but
our money can go to Barbados and here. Imagine.
yeah, but you can't take over the program in the sense that I have other people beeping on the line to get through. I don't want to be rude to you because I know you're always very interesting, but you've raised 2 issues already. Could we leave the third one to another time?
I think
I'll be back on next Thursday. We can talk about this again.
Got to go home. Find somebody who could run this thing. The governor of the bank got to go. Got to go home.
I'm sorry about that. We'll try to, next week, we'll talk about the banks and what's going on with de-risking and some of the issues that impact on the Caribbean countries, not only Guyana. Hello, Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance. I have 2 minutes left.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Hi, good afternoon.
I think this present government have a problem with the rule of law and order in this country.
Why do you say that?
On our announcement with this pension was ill-advised.
Yes, I think so too.
I can recall an attorney general losing so many cases in court and keep appealing and appealing and appealing all the time. With all the lawyers they have at their disposal, they need to do a far more better job than what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Our program, the time flies by, huh? It always does. And I hope that you find it interesting and stuff like that. But one of the important issues is that, you know, this is 2016. The younger generation have access to information. They're on the net. And they hear, they learn good things, bad things, new things, information that's useful to them. But this is a different world that we're living in than 30 years ago and stuff like that, where it used to take a letter 6 weeks to get to London, or even sometimes 6 weeks to get into Latham. It's a different world today. Information passes quickly, and our people, and generally people, are better educated about what's going on around them. And there's some major global issues that are taking place that will have an impact on Guyana outside of what the government's doing. And so you've heard about the Brexit and the UK decision by referendum to come out of the European Union. That will have an impact on us in Guyana. The decisions taken in relation to the de-risking and different American banks delinking their corresponding banks in the region, the CARICOM, including here in Guyana, these all have major impacts. The government of today, the APNU AFC, has to recognize those issues and respond to them, and has to be able to protect the nation, to protect the country, to protect the economy, to protect the people. Many times governments must step in to be able to anticipate, to cushion the impact or correct or take remedial action to what are external things hitting us as a country, as well as addressing what are the internal and national imperatives we have regardless of what's going on overseas. So anyway, talked a lot today, and we'll be back next Thursday, sorry. We don't have Parliament next Thursday. We have Thursday Parliament on Monday. So I hope that you'll be able, who like live streaming, to be able to watch the debate and to see what happens there, so that you're well informed and you know what's going on. And so, as I say each time, please don't drink and drive. Please don't drink and drive. We want you to be safe. You want to be with your families that love you dearly. And in the week between now and next Thursday, have a blessed week. May all things good happen to you and your families, good health, and a lot of happiness in between, because I know that you are facing enormous challenges these days with what's going on. I know that. But still, I wish you all the very best, and that we'll meet again. We'll meet again next Thursday, 12:30 to 1:30, right here on Channel 6, with matters of public importance. Have a blessed week again. Bye-bye. Ta-ta. See you.